It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. I'm been very excited that our keynote speaker here has taken an interest in this topic. His insight has been invaluable, but the talk will be the new scientific revolution of anomalous phenomena. And to tell you a little bit about him, he's a retired Rear Admiral. Tim Gallaudet also holds a Ph.D. in oceanography. From 2017 to 2019, he served as the acting Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Prior to NOAA, Gallaudet served for 32 years in the U.S. Navy, completing his career as an oceanographer of the Navy on the staff of the Chief of Naval Operations. He now serves as the CEO of Ocean STL Consulting and the host of the American Blue Economy podcast. Welcome.
Hey, Alejandro. Thanks for that generous introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you great.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks again for having me. And I'm really proud to be at the keynote at this really terrific conference at such an incredible time for the topic of anomalous phenomena. And so, like to begin with, first, a little background about myself. As you mentioned, Alejandro, I served in the Navy, and my top job was the oceanographer of the Navy in the Pentagon. And then later I served leading an agency called NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So my life's calling is the ocean and ocean science, and that's where I really have a expertise in. And the whole UAP thing is really kind of a late comer in my career. I've always been fascinated with UFOs and the topic personally, but it's nothing I took serious study of until I had a job at the U.S. Naval Observatory. I was the superintendent for 2.5 years. And there I worked with a great team of astrophysicists, and their job was to catalog star positions and brightnesses for use in satellite navigation. And as I read more about astrophysics and cosmology and really began to think about that every day because it was my job, I gained an appreciation for the fact that we're a small planet around a medium-sized star in a galaxy of 100 to 400 billion stars, among up to possibly hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe. And when anyone considers that for just a bit, you have to think how arrogant we'd be as a species to think that we're alone. And so I started to think more and more about the phenomena when I was in this position. And then when I became an admiral, a one-star, I had an experience. And it's not what everyone who has had an experience would call one, but it's the closest I could get, if you will. And let me paint the scene here. We're all familiar now with the Navy Go Fast video from an F-18 jet off the East Coast during an exercise. Well, when I was working for the commander of Fleet Forces Command, a 4-star admiral, he was in charge of that exercise. And it was one of the main ships in it was the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And I had sailors on that ship. And at the time, my office was in Mississippi, Stennis Space Center, a NASA center. And I received an email from my boss's operations officer, a 2-star admiral, and it was on the Navy's secret internet. And the email was addressed to me and about 20 other subordinate commanders. Some of those commanders were in charge of carrier strike groups. Some, like me, were in charge of support commands, and mine was focused on meteorology and oceanography and providing the weather forecast for the aviators in this exercise. And the email from this 2-star, the title was Urgent Safety of Flight Issue. And the text of the email was short, and it just said, if any of you know what this is, please tell me immediately. We are having numerous multiple mid-air collisions with these, and we may have to shut down the exercise. And attached was this video. And of course, I called in my deputy. He was also in receipt of the email, and we had a discussion. And I just became aware that there's more out there than we know, and it's right in front of us, of course. And the interesting thing about that too is the next day, the email was wiped from my computer and my deputies, and it was never talked about again. And I went to monthly meetings with this command, and safety of flight was a big deal. And if they were going to shut down this exercise, that was even a bigger deal, because the exercise schedule is really busy and packed before an aircraft carrier strike group deploys to the Middle East, which this one was doing. And so to shut down an exercise is a big deal. I was the chief meteorologist of the Navy, so safety of flight was my main job. And for no one to talk about it was just, I thought, incredible. And of course, now we know that UAPs are part of compartmented programs, and I'll get into that in the hearing later. But this had me thinking for the rest of my career in government, of course, because it was on a secret system, I couldn't talk about it. And it's only now that the video has been released and we're having hearings, et cetera, that I am able to be more open about it and be an advocate for UAP scientific study. So that's my experience. And I carried that with me all through government. And now we're at this point, which is really remarkable for SCU, and that now scientific study of UAP is considered important, necessary at the highest levels of government. And so when we think about the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th century, of course, when Galileo moments were being made with Galileo and Copernicus before him and Isaac Newton later, and we all think that was just such a remarkable period of scientific enlightenment. And as I tweeted a month ago, I think what we're going to learn from the technology and the study of UAP and everything else about them, this is a new scientific revolution we're on that will make the prior revolution look like baby steps. And so the new scientific revolution, of course, has been heralded by these brave people that we saw just this week. And you'll see I'm on the far right. I had a far left, pardon me. I had a front row seat here, and I was proud to be a part of that team supporting these brave witnesses. And what I want to do for the audience here is dig into these three people quickly, because I hear a lot of talk on the media and elsewhere, and it's relatively uninformed. I know these people and where they come from, and I want to lend some credibility to each of them. So first off, David Grush. It's just crazy, all the back and forth about him by people who know nothing about the DoD and the intelligence community. So David was a major, and then he transitioned to a civilian job and ended at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, an agency I work with closely because they help make, believe it or not, seafloor maps. And so they have a whole maritime division that I work with. And when I was in the Navy, I provided the bathymetric data for them to make the maps and charts that the Navy operates in are all around the world. And of course, they have other functions. Geospatial intelligence primarily is image intelligence, and that's what he had a specialty in. And everything about him is absolutely legitimate. And when I listened to him at the hearing, I became even more of a believer because of his knowledge of the various classification processes and programs. And so DoD classification is at the heart of what he's coming out about. And that's why he went to the Inspector General to ensure that he wasn't violating any classified procedures and protocols. So David is completely legitimate. I worked with his agency that he was with, and his background is really beyond reproach. And David Fravor is the same. I've sailed on Navy aircraft carriers, actually 3 of them. I worked with naval aviators throughout my entire career. My job was to keep them safe with weather forecasts. And again, David is the real deal. He is absolutely who he says he is. And his observations are first rate. I mean, naval aviators' job is to be aware of airspace, and they live and die by that awareness and objective observation. So David Fravor also is completely legitimate. And the same goes for Ryan Graves. And Ryan has founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace. Here's a picture of him at the hearing, and you can see I'm over his right shoulder. And I'm on his board of advisors, full transparency, because I believe in what he's doing. The scientific study of UAP is important for a whole range of issues, not to mention keeping our airspace safe. And so I'm proud to be a team on his team and being a cheerleader for him. And he did, again, just a terrific job at the hearing. And so that his calling for the scientific study of UAP, I think, is outstanding, terrific. I'm glad that Congress gets it. And so I want to give a shout out to Robert Powell and everybody at SCU for having a long lineage of doing the scientific study of UAP and UFOs before it. Same thing. And I just pulled out this one presentation from 2021 because I want to express my appreciation to you, Robert, because like this, for example, natural language processing for UFO databases. This is the cutting edge of AI science right now. And ChatGPT is a spin-off of that and a reflection of advancements in AI. And good on SCU for staying up to date with the latest scientific advances and applying them to UAP studies. This as one example. But in this whole topic of scientific study of UAP, NASA's gotten into the game and they've had a study team convened in their first public hearing. I will admit, I was absolutely underwhelmed with that hearing. And even though there's some people on that study team I know and respect, it just seemed indicative of me. It's going to be really difficult to get information out of the government. And I think the case in point is the AARO office. And a lot of people in the UAP community are really slamming Sean Kirkpatrick. And in his defense, I'll tell you how it works in the government. NASA and DOD are part of the executive branch, and that is under the White House. And so they're not going to say anything and do anything unless it's White House policy to disclose. And right now, the White House is pretty much silent on it. So I don't know if Sean even knows of the programs that David Grush mentioned in the hearing. My bet is he doesn't. I think he was given a very narrow leash to study UAP in data sets. He's only been allowed to talk about it in unclassified settings and at the unclassified level. And most of what the DoD has in terms of UAP data currently is classified, and certainly in terms of observations collected by technical satellite systems that are top secret. So Sean just doesn't have the charter yet. Congress, I think their intent was a lot different. Certainly Senator Gillibrand wanted more to be opened up, but the White House has to really direct policy on disclosure. And that what has to happen next, in addition to Congress getting in the act, who has the ultimate authority with appropriations, money, and the budget for the executive branch, as well as authorities. I'll say a little more on that later. But on the topic of scientific study, I think the real advances are going to be made with groups like Avi Loeb's Galileo and, of course, SCU, who are working to set up systematic studies. I saw Abby White is on the call here, and she's the next generation in this area. And I'm just really I hope to see you at Harvard, Abby, this week. And Avi's doing it right. And I'm really, really proud to be a research affiliate on his team. Again, there was a lot in the open media for and against Dr. Loeb, but ultimately, I think he's really setting the bar for scientific study of UAP. And there's just so much to say about that. Also, my expertise is ocean-related science, and I was really excited to see Avi delve into that realm, dive into it literally, in his expedition off Papua New Guinea to recover the fragments of the first observed interstellar meteor. And now he's still doing the analysis of the debris from that meteor, but he's found over several hundred of the small spherules that the meteor basically melted into, and so the study of those might be able to lead us into more understanding of objects of extraterrestrial or interstellar origin, which is really exciting. And he's going to go back and look for bigger things sometime this year, I believe. Now, this is the area that I've been putting my attention to because it's my area of expertise. Some people call these USOs, unidentified submerged objects. Now that the AARO office is looking at all domains, we could just call these undersea UAP, whatever. But here is a well-known one from the USS Omaha. That's what that ship looks like. It's a littoral combat ship off of Southern California, and I believe 2020. And so we know these observations have occurred of these UAP transitioning from one media to the other. And with my knowledge of ocean science, I've tried to look into that. And the first step I took was with this gentleman. Victor Vescovo and I partnered together when I was at NOAA to conduct a national plan to map the U.S. ocean, the exclusive economic zone. And he's quite famous. You should Google this 5 Deeps expedition. He dived in the deepest trenches around the world's oceans at depths of 35,000 feet, but over 10,000 meters, and built his own submersible, bought his own ship. $50 million later, he set these world records. But he also wanted to support science. And so his ship had the top of the line multi-beam sonar. And so we used his ship to collect data in places we never had data. And so I maintained my relationship with him. And Victor was going to do a test in Southern California to test the new sonar he installed on his ship. And when I learned about it, based on all the UAP activity near Catalina Island, I asked him if he would mind looking at the seafloor in that area at some spots where we knew UAP activity occurred, just to see if he'd find anything. And I was a little surprised, but he responded, okay, I'd be happy to. So interesting that leaders like this are willing to look into this issue more and more. And so he did just that. This is the area, Southern California. Disregard the location, but in that little box to the lower right that says rockfall, there was a geologic feature that myself and Sarah Little, who's on this call, were interested. And of course, I'll just cut to the chase. You know, there's talk about, is there a UAP base in Southern California? It sounds wild, but after this week's hearing, maybe not. And so Sarah and I thought we wanted to look at this feature, and we asked Victor to go do it. So upper left, here's the whole area he surveyed around. There were other areas that we knew that Navy ships saw UAP, and we asked him to look at. But this one area that we called the rockfall is blown up right here. And you see there's an undersea ridge, and there's a big section of it that's carved out of it and displaced. Now, I've talked to some world-leading geologists and undersea mappers, one of them Larry Mayer at University of New Hampshire, and he performed the analysis for me. The distance from that displaced section to the ridge is 2 kilometers. And the total height of that object is about, I think, 100 meters, pardon me. And I can't find an explanation for this. Now, we've had a few people say that this could be a turbidity flow, which is the term for basically a undersea river of mud. But it's hard to imagine such a horizontal displacement without any kind of distribution along the path of debris. And so the next step is to take an ROV and get some optical imagery of that section and see if there is something to it. I know it sounds outlandish to many, but I think in this audience, probably not. So that's one area I'm pursuing. Another is this. Now, I am on a body under the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine called the Ocean Studies Board. And these are the premier leaders in ocean science in the nation. And we study a variety of oceanographic events, if you will, and activities and concepts. And I went to them and I recommended a survey of all the oceanographic data sets in academia and in the government. And they said it's worth looking into. Why don't you go to the Naval Studies Board and because then they can look at classified data. So I did that. And this is the gentleman in charge of it, retired 4-star Admiral Gary Roughead, who was the head of the Navy, the chief of naval operations. And Admiral Roughead said he wanted to do it. It was a good idea. So that's the kind of buy-in we're getting, which is amazing for the scientific study of undersea UAP. So I expect a lot more to ramp up in the future. Now, some of the press about the hearing this week has been a little disappointing. In fact, I think everybody in the audience probably thinks, why are we not talking more about these incredible revelations? And it is mystifying. And I think probably that it's going to take a while for the public to just take hold of this. And So it's really, I'm amazed that we're not more people don't think this is the top news story of the day. I am just mystified too that topics like Hunter Biden and Donald Trump are outweighing this by orders of magnitude. And I hope we can do better as a species in terms of curiosity. But I'm encouraged by others coming out. And for example, people have questioned, well, where are these other people David Grush talked about? Well, here's one who's appeared in the media. And this gentleman, Carl, was a career Army officer. I don't know him, but his credentials are top of the line. He is working right now as a modernization advisor for the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, the #2 in the US Army in the Pentagon. And so I'd say it was a very good choice to pick him. And him coming out is I think representative that more and more will follow, and we should be encouraged. Real credible people here. And then of course Congress is following up. Just yesterday, Tim Burchett tweeted this, and this select committee is going to be established, and that will be permanent. It's bipartisan, so it will remain. And I believe we all can be encouraged. So looking forward, this is an amazing time. We are going to be learning about technology, which, as David Fravor testified, defies anything we possess today. And the potential benefits are immense in terms of energy, power, transportation, agriculture, biomedicine, new discoveries of the universe, and potentially solutions to challenges like climate change. And God forbid we take this into the national security realm, but at least for medicine and other things, we know that there will be great scientific gains to be had. But it's interesting. One of the common questions I get is, are people ready for this? Can they handle it? And I think if you ask Hollywood, I guess that depends. It depends on the outcome you foresee. But what's interesting is we just don't know. And so all of these outcomes are possibilities until we learn more. And so some of that is frightening, and maybe some of that is encouraging. We just don't know, and we will know. And these are important questions if we continue our scientific study like the SCU is doing. My last comment before I take questions is something about UFO Twitter. And I have to just be amazed somewhat and amused probably more. When I tweet something on ocean issues, I maybe get 5 likes, whatever. And my one or maybe a handful of tweets here before the hearing and David Grush's News Nation interview got this kind of response, 500,000 views over that. And it's just, it's the power of UFO Twitter is not lost on me. So I'll just say that. But to close, I want to make a comment about these three brave individuals, in addition to the hearing witnesses, Lou Elizondo, Jay Stratton, and Chris Mellon. They're, of course, all over the UFO internet, but I know them, and I come from the world they come from. I was in the Pentagon. I have access to many of the programs they were read into, not all of them, and I had, and they showed great courage in coming out, knowing that this was being withheld from the American people. It was being withheld from Congress, and that was a problem, and that was wrong. And I have to say that all of them have, at personal cost, done this, and I think they all deserve great credit. They're all credible, good people. They're patriots. They're good Americans. And for all that is said about them, I think it only should be good. Now, with that, I want to say thank you. I enjoy being here, and I will have to try to turn my screen back over to you, Alejandro.
All right, so we do have a lot of questions, so I'll start in with some of these. Do be sure that your microphone is muted, so the noise isn't coming through, so we can hear and the presenter. But here's the top question and the Q&A. Data has been recorded, radar, infrared, video, other on several UAP. Can you tell us about a key case where data has also been recorded on a USO? and what conclusions, oh, and then there's kind of a second question. We'll just start with that one. Any USO, meaning underwater objects that you're aware of?
Right. I know of one case that data has been collected. I've not been able to access the data. I know where it is. And I've interviewed the person who was on board the Navy submarine that had the observation. I also have heard of others, but I've not yet interviewed those individuals. And I've only just started my journey. But I imagine more to come. And again, I've heard anecdotes from very credible witnesses that there are many more out there. And yeah, so if any of you online have observations, you can find my contact information online. I'm at Ocean STL, or you can just Google my name and you'll find it pretty easily. And I'd welcome any reporting that anyone in the audience has.
All right, the second part of that, the second question that was being asked is, what conclusions were drawn and might we expect a whistleblower to report publicly? I'm not totally sure, I guess, what they're getting at, but I think maybe any insights that you have, especially on this whistleblower function that Grush used, which I believe was outside of Aero, and how that process may work.
Well, it was, and it was entirely in the IC community, and again, I think that is an avenue because now legally people can come forward, and that was put forward in, I think, the last National Defense Authorization Act. So there's champions in Congress who want this information to come out. They want whistleblowers to come forward. David Grush is the first of, I think, many, I hope, where we can find real answers about information, about data, about equipment, as he mentioned, which is really remarkable.
Thank you. And I know someone has their hand raised. Actually, go put your question in the chat or the Q&A section, and that's where we'll be pulling the question. The next one is, I guess it's more around your idea of what Aero may come up with. So here's the question: what 21st century explanations for UFO UAP will Aero come up with, or will they stick with the old chestnuts of weather balloon, Venus, marsh gas, and temperature inversions, not counting drones as they go without saying? So I think the point is, you touched on this a bit earlier, kind of the skepticism about Aero and their intentions. Is your sense, more along the lines of that they are doing their best to get to answers, but kind of maybe hampered with bureaucracy?
Right, and I don't want to talk trash about Sean Kirkpatrick and his people, some of whom I've talked to, because they are Defense Department officials like I was, and they're trying to do their best. But they were given a charter to look at certain data sets. But what I don't know, first off, is what is the White House policy, as I mentioned, because they're going to be bound by what the White House National Security Council and potentially the Office of Science and Technology Policy direct them to do. And so this really requires White House policy. And so right now, Sean may not be read into the programs, doubtful that David Grush was, or that David Grush was referring to, the crash retrieval programs. And so now he just might be looking at satellite imagery and radar and other data. And if that's all he's got, then that's all he can work with. And what he really needs to do is be opened up to other programs. And I don't know if he's given that charter. So, and that's a problem. If we know that one hand is not talking to the other in the Defense Department, that's not good. But by the way, I'm here to tell you, because I've been in government for so long, that is not uncommon to have one office not talking to the other. It's not good government, but it happens all the time. And it creates inefficiency and problems like the one we're addressing today. Good news is Congress is getting it, and it's easy for them to pass legislation to direct the offices to work better, to share information, and so forth.
All right, thank you so much. It's all just such a helpful insight. Here's a great question: have we had any luck picking these up on sonar or hydrophones? If so, should we be talking about setting up sensor buoys as cheaply as possible somewhere to see if we can generate data on them if the phenomena is often underwater?
So yes is the answer. That's my goal. And but I glossed over this briefly, but so the first step should be to go to the Navy, the main agencies, the Naval Oceanographic Office, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and my old agency, NOAA, and ask them to survey their ocean data sets for anomalous phenomena. And it's a lot harder in the ocean. It's less transparent, obviously, much more opaque than the atmosphere. Difficult sonar data is really hard to work with. And the way sonars work is typically filters are applied to remove noise. And an object going faster than 50 knots is usually would be considered noise in any sonar processing algorithm. So this is a tough nut to crack. But NOAA, for example, has a job, as does the Office of Naval Intelligence, to look at the ocean, look at maritime domain extensively. And I believe that a little bit of study, systematic study of their data sets might reveal some of these to occur. Going forward, yes, I think we should be putting in data sets all around the ocean. I'm working with some private companies that do just that, and open the aperture and look for what may be out there. Because we know that these objects are going into the ocean and coming out of it, and looking for that more systematically is something I want to do. And again, I want to get the Naval Studies Board chairman, Admiral Roughead, approved me to lead a study. The first thing I have to do, though, is I have to get funding. And that means I have to go to the Naval Oceanographic Office, ONI, and NOAA and ask them if they're willing to fund such a survey. And then with a survey done like that, if we find that there are USO hotspots, then we target a more directed collection effort, like in Southern California.
Talking about funding for projects like this, do you think that perhaps there should be more organizations, nonprofits, to kind of try to gather from funding from the private sector or public? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I think all bets are on, if you will. Anybody, if philanthropy wants to get involved, I think that'd be great. That Galileo is pretty much, it's an academic / nonprofit effort. And that's using a mix of private donated funds as well as resources at Harvard University. So that's a great model. I mean, as I learn more, I've been including my work as part of the Galileo project. One of their scientists, Richard Cloyt, has talked to me about having a kind of undersea arm of Galileo, and that's still very nascent. But that we're going forward in that with that discussion again, finding who can support us. But I do think a public-private partnership with it is really important. And there are organizations like the discoverer of the Titanic, Robert Ballard, a personal friend of mine. He has an exploration ship that conducts exploration missions around the world. And he's in the Pacific right now with his ship, the Nautilus. I've been on the ship. And that's one example of somebody, an entity that can contribute to this effort.
Great, thank you. So this next question, what is the solution for bridging the gap between military, government, and private public science, academic, scientific organizations in analyzing data captured by military-grade tracking systems, at the same time satisfying and preserving national security concerns, their example being the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group and the incident data. So really, all we've heard from that case has been leaked. We haven't had any really official data come about that case.
Yeah, the answer to that is what's happening now, and that's Congress getting involved. Because really, the best you can do in getting the government to partner with the private sector and universities and research institute is being an advocate, and that really that won't influence any given agency. What's going to influence a given agency is either White House policy and or congressional legislation. And so Congress right now is in the driver's seat, thankfully. And I'm really glad to see this UAP Select Committee get announced. That's going to be it. That's the answer. That committee, and go to your congressman as the answer, and encourage them to direct these kind of partnerships into law.
So this next question, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, and there's been a lot of controversy about it. Sorry, aircraft going over. I'm at an air show here, but the question being around the terminology being used. So some people concerned about kind of the changes going on. The question directly is, what 21st century explanations for UFO, UAP will arrow? Oh, that's the wrong. Oh, it went away. But essentially, the question is around this changing of the word UFO to UAP. Some people are suspicious that that's kind of just as being used as a distraction and to point people in a different direction. The question's also arisen, have we really lost the baggage from the terminology UFO moving to UAP? Seems like, especially in the media, is still not getting that the U stands for unidentified, not alien spacecraft necessarily. What do you think about the thoughts about, the use and the change of that word?
This is just personal opinion, Alejandro, but I think it's good, but because as we learn more and more, the nature of these phenomena are very diverse. And I think that the broader term of UAP is more representative of what we're seeing. There's this big debate in the UFO community over, let's see, whether there's orbs and there's craft and there's this paranormal connection, which is really interesting for people who've read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. So I think it's good because it's more all-encompassing of the phenomena, which I don't have explanations for. I've read about it much, but right now we have so much to learn, and that's why I'm glad to be here and being an advocate for more scientific study. But I think it's a good thing, and also there's so much stigma on the word on the term UFO that in this effort to break free from the stigma, which I've written about in an op-ed. If we can do that, and if UAP, the term is a way to do that, that's a good thing.
All right, here's a great question. Over the past 6 years, it appears the Navy is more open to disclosure than the U.S. Air Force. Why is that? And I think this is particularly important in that the U.S. Air Force is the one sitting on the trove of data on this topic.
Well, that observation is absolutely correct. And Chris Mellon has written a very extensive, lengthy article on this very topic. And I'm really glad that he did that. I would be guessing to come up with a reason, but I know from a service standpoint, having been in the Navy, the Navy the Navy's culture is much more flexible. In terms of flexible thinking, and that's just how it is when you're at sea. You have to adapt. You don't have a shore installation to lean on, and it's just the nature of naval operations from their origins in the Mediterranean, really, in Egypt, that one has to be more flexible at sea and in the way we work and in the way we think. And I think that is just coming out now in this. And I don't want to, again, trash my fellow Air Force service members. We're all on the same team. But the Air Force is much more rigid in its thinking, and then that's just sort of the nature of it, being a relatively new service. And and I'll just say that's probably one reason. But I'd be guessing. I really can't speak for the Air Force right now. They have to speak for themselves.
Great, thank you. And then this is someone asking if you know more about this topic. Rumor has it that there's a longer version of the Go Fast video, perhaps even showing the UAP making some kind of abrupt turn. Do you recall the version of Go Fast that you watched being longer than the one that was released to the public?
Yeah, I really don't. I remember that clip, but I don't remember how long it was. I'm sure there's more data. That's what the jets were doing. They were collecting minutes of data. So not sure where it is. And that's why this topic is so exciting, because there are, I'm sure, mountains of data in the Pentagon right now on things we all want to see. So we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. And now Dave Grush has exposed a decades-long program or set of programs. And that, again, is also the tip of an iceberg. I can say that, just having a good feel for how those programs work over time. And that's what's so exciting. And even better, again, there's action now. People are coming forward, and the Congress is getting more energized, and they're going to institutionalize UAP investigations and hearings and legislation and oversight. So it's a great time right now. This is the timing of me speaking today could not have been better.
Yeah, it boosted our attendance, so we were happy about that. In regards to Aero spokeswoman, or she's really kind of the Pentagon spokeswoman on UAP, Susan goes, and there's some controversy on how to say her last name. There's been a lot of debate we've been talking about. Is it Go or Goff? In regards to the, Susan Go's statement that the office has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession of reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently, what, in your opinion, constitutes verifiable evidence? Would that be Navy pilot eyewitness testimony, IR video, radar tracks, or otherwise?
Well, this is interesting because what we're touching on here is how the Pentagon speaks at an unclassified level. And right now, they obviously are not, that is an unclassified statement. There could likely be a classified statement that says we do have verifiable evidence of UAP, et cetera. So that's just what they are now. That's the restrictions they're operating under right now. So obviously there is a disconnect. Dave Grush just announced that there are programs with evidence, and AR saying no. And why are they saying no? Because either they're not read into those programs, or they're not clear to talk about those programs. Now, and that's that institution trying to keep up with the disclosure that Congress is mandating, and that therefore the disconnect. I don't think they're being disingenuous. They're operating with their own classification restrictions, and that's a problem. So and they have. I don't know and can't speak again for the office or Sean and his people, who I respect, but they're given some restrictions on how to talk and what to talk about. And of course, everyone saw him at the hearing. He gave an unclassified hearing, and then he had a classified one. No one knows what was said because it was classified. So there's that. And then we don't even know, again, if he is read into the programs Dave talked about. So I won't say they're being disingenuous and they're liars. That's not knowing how the Pentagon works and what classification procedures and protocols are like and how they work. And so what's needed is either the White House to direct policy and or Congress to put it in, clear this up in law.
Yeah, and it seems like there's confusion around that even within the Congress and who's classified for what, even with this Eglin Air Force incident. Gates was classified or cleared for information, whereas the other representatives weren't. And that's caused confusion. Even members inside of the hearing the other day, some are cleared, some aren't. And we hear Susan Goff saying, yesterday, make sure if you're sharing information that you're sharing it with the right people. And it seems like that makes things pretty confusing, especially for someone like Grush, because he has to be very careful on what he's saying to who, because everybody has a different classification level.
Right. Well, let me explain to the audience some of how this works. Currently, you're given a classification level based on your need to know, and that could be from confidential to secret to top secret to top secret sensitive compartment and information, SCI. Within top secret SCI, those are where you have these SAPs, special access programs. And these are the things Dave Grush referred to. Special access programs are, there's many regarding, like hundreds, regarding very sensitive technology and means that we don't want adversaries to get. And I've been read into several, and a list is maintained of everybody who's read into the program. And based on the sensitivity, some programs have very few people. I mean, we're talking handfuls only of people read into it. And then once you leave, like when I left the military, I was read out and I signed an NDA and I will never talk about these things, et cetera. And so that's what's governing all this, and that's why it was so delicate for him to talk about. Now, and the same. So you might have a member of Congress read into a SAP, but others not. And what I loved about the hearing is how so that's classification. Got to follow those procedure and protocols. but any member of Congress has the authority to get read in. And that's what he talked about, is they have oversight authority over DOD. And for these Air Force officers to have not allowed access for members of Congress, big mistake. And so I'm glad they're calling them out on that.
That's very interesting and helpful insight. What can you say about reports that USOs, UAP can fly at Mach 1 or to 2+ under the water without disturbing the surrounding water? Is this accurate? If so, what physics and science can explain these observations?
Right. Well, this is a great question, and because it covers the whole topic that is the title of my talk. So when David Fravor talked about the objects coming from space all the way down to his altitude and up in an instant, and the observations we all have heard about of really rapid acceleration that defies any kind of G-forces pilots could withstand, or any aircraft or vehicle that humans have made, all these anomalous phenomena that, and we believe we know of instances in the water, possibly. So we're all touching on some either physics we don't know about yet. And I'm not saying defying the laws of physics. What I'm saying is we still have a lot to learn about physics. And I think when we look at the history of our civilization, that we've only been on this planet for a sliver of time of its existence. And I love this quote. So at the Naval Observatory, there was a very famous scientist around the turn of the 19th to 20th century named Michelson. He won the Nobel Prize for measuring the speed of light. And he made a quote about saying, and like I forgot the time frame right before Einstein made his 4 seminal papers, that we've discovered everything there is to discover in physics, and now we're only going to make more precise measurements of it all. And then Einstein comes along with general and special relativity and blows that out of the water. Well, who's not to say that in 100 years or 10, we're going to find some physics that are beyond anything we know about? And there's a lot out there, anti-gravity, this, etc. I'm not an expert on any of that stuff, but I'm an open-minded person. And I am convinced that as a species, we barely scratched the surface, pardon me, of what is knowable in the universe. And these technologies, these phenomena are giving us some insight into what is possible. And that's what's so exciting to me, and why I label this talk the new scientific revolution. Because now that it's coming out, it is a revolution. And I'm very excited for what lies ahead.
I would like to ask you about this. There is a lot of controversy around the paper that Kirkpatrick and Loeb wrote together. The way I interpreted that paper was speaking to the skeptics and to the people like us who are scientists and looking into the topic. One, telling the skeptics that, hey, even using conventional physics, there's a way that possibly something's coming from somewhere and observing us. And then also telling the scientists that if you're claiming that laws of physics are being broken, you've got to prove that. You can't just say it. You've got to write papers. You've got to have sensor data to prove that. And I think that that's what the message was in my mind, but it definitely got mixed up by this whole, I think what they used just as an analogy, you know, this whole mothership kind of potential. How did you read that paper? And did you see it, you know, like a lot of the media and some of the public took it as some kind of big mistake to be making these sort of references?
I don't think it was a mistake. I thought it was good to do. It's using the laws of physics as we know them. Here's what we think we can achieve and see and detect. And that is absolutely worth doing. Again, now it's not to say that we are going to make a new discovery about something that will make that paper antiquated. And that is the nature of science, new discoveries. And so I think it was good to do this first step. And I absolutely applaud both of them for the scientific study of this phenomena. That's what they're doing, applying the scientific method today as we know it, and our understanding of physics and science as we know it. But I am, as I said, very keen on keeping an open mind about new discoveries, because we're seeing things we can't explain, and therefore we only by studying them scientifically might we be able to learn how they're doing it and why, and more of the what about it.
Great. I agree with you. I like the message of the paper, but unfortunately, you and I are definitely in the minority. Here's a question. If you had to guess the likelihood that we have an alien craft in our possession, what percent likelihood would you guess? It's kind of a tough one there.
100%. I am convinced, and I'm sure there's more. Just because, and why is that? Well, I haven't seen it, so maybe I'll say 99.99. But I know how the government works, and it's just so entirely plausible for me to have what's happened, to have special access programs, shield from leadership knowledge about them. I've seen this happen because of the sensitivity and knowing that leadership rotates often. And I've seen that career bureaucrats in the intelligence community shielding that from leadership. Totally believe it. And so there's that. There's everything we know about UAP and study. There's something around us. There's just too many observations to ignore. And then again, the observations that we see from credible pilots like Ryan and David. So I am convinced. Now, there's a couple arguments against this. Oh, if something's so advanced to travel from interdimensional or interstellar, then why would they crash? I mean, are we that naive to think so? And I thought Ryan Graves said it great. He said, well, statistically, in so many sorties, there's a problem occurs. And maybe that's what's happening is we're seeing many visitations, and every now and then there is an interaction, a problem. And I don't think that's beyond a reasonable assessment.
Great, thank you for that answer. Was the bloop recorded in 1997 by NOAA, which was later explained as an iceberg, but remained puzzling for a long time, related to USOs, and it was a very large sound heard on hydrophones across thousands of miles and originally sounded biological?
Right, that's a great question. I've not had a chance to look into it, but that is one of the phenomena I am targeting in my survey to go back and look at things like that. So and I thank you whoever asked that question, because right, I want to find out. I don't know, and that's the purpose of what I'm going to do going forward in looking at undersea UAP.
All right, next one. Did you say that at one point several military aircraft had an actual mid-air collision with a UFO, or was it near misses? If actual collisions, was any UFO material retrieved?
No, it was near midair. So no, there weren't in the exercise in 2014 to 2015 with the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Those were all near midair collisions. And actually, Ryan spoke at detail about the object being at the entry point for Whiskey 72, the name of the carrier training operation area, and that they were flying within 30 feet or something of the object. So that's what I was talking about. And believe me, that is danger close in aviation, especially jet aircraft aviation. And that's why the two-star sounded the alarm to everybody under him, because he didn't want to see a mid-air collision on his watch.
So there's been a lot of media attention, of course, to the skeptical perspective of the Go Fast, that it was just a balloon. What are your thoughts to that attention versus, of course, what many officials and what the pilots are saying, which is that is not the case?
Well, balloons don't move like that. And I know there's been various analyses of how fast it was moving. I thought one result was 40 miles per hour, whatever. That didn't operate like a balloon. And by the way, if you recall hearing the pilots on that video, there was a whole fleet of them. And that's what Ryan Graves testified to, that there was a fleet of them. Balloons don't operate like that. They randomly move in the wind. So I think that's a rather shaky conclusion.
All right, the next question essentially is a little bit harsh in its criticism of Kirkpatrick, so I'll just kind of give you the gist of the question. But essentially, they're wondering if you have any comments about Sean Kirkpatrick's public response to the hearing that he posted on LinkedIn and took down. Of course, that is a hot topic today.
So I understand why people are critical of him. I get it. And but here, I just know kind of what happens when you're in the executive branch. He has got a charter from the SecDef. Of course, Congress wrote his office in the law, but then the SecDef interpreted it, and basically they're allowing him to look at a set of programs and look for and analyze UAP. And he gave that brief to on the Hill recently about it. And again, he can only talk about what he can talk about at an unclassified level on LinkedIn. So that's his unclassified response. Now, the Pentagon may have grouped all this, the classified part of this, into an IC activity under Title 50, which he can't talk about. So and the reason he made that statement is, I would guess, either the Defense Department at the high level of SecDef or the White House National Security Council doesn't want him talking about disclosing UAP anything. So that's the thing, is he's bound by White House direction and SecDef direction with authorities from the Hill, from Congress. But I just know how I've been there. I've been the head of an agency. I know that it gets really, it's a real thin needle to navigate on trying to do good, but also follow White House intent and not make Congress angry. So I give him a lot more leeway than others because I've been there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some of us can at least sympathize with this frustration, and appreciate him actually backing his people. Putting that foot down to protect his staff.
That's right.
Here's a quick question. Do you know whether USOs are considered a threat or being looked at by the Russian Navy?
That's a great question. And, I'm writing an op-ed right now on this whole topic, UAP, and there's no reason to think that they're not, and the Chinese as well. Because really, if there's any way to gain an advantage, and we've done it, Russia's already shared that we are reverse engineering the craft we are finding. Why not? And so I would bet yes. And therefore is one of my ultimate conclusions is that, okay, if we are being visited by these intelligences from somewhere else, we as a planet should get our stuff together because this is bigger than a challenge we've ever faced. It's not a national security issue. It's a global security issue. And we ought to unite and just get over some of these differences we have, which are so petty when you think about what we're on the verge of discovering. So please, it's yes. I bet the Russians are, and the Chinese and others. And if anything should unite us, this should be it.
All right, we're almost out of time. Actually, we'll have one quick question. Someone's asking the Go Fast video, and let's do one clarification. Some people were kind of confused versus the Go Fast, the gimbal, there's the 3 different videos. So the quick question I would ask is, do any of those seem to potentially have a prosaic answer, or do you believe they all do certainly seem to be anomalous, like the Navy seems to have concluded?
I think they're all anomalous, and I think that's a fair conclusion by the Navy.
Okay, great. We'll have to end it there. We're out of time, but thank you so very much. This was a great presentation, a lot of wonderful information and great questions. So thank you very much. We can't be more happier with your participation in our event.
It was my pleasure, Alejandro. And thanks to everybody online. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And I look to be with you sometime again in the future.